The Power Factor Show with Rick, Steve, and Caleb. Episode 48.
You can find this podcast and others at Gun Rights Radio Network, gunrightsradio.com. Podcasting freedom.
Brought to you by Safariland.
Welcome to Power Factor. I'm Rick.
I'm Caleb.
I'm Steve.
And this week's episode, we are going to do reader emails again.
We love.
Yeah, we are.
Actually, the viewer emails.
Viewer, exactly. Well,
Listener.
Yeah, listener emails.
Yeah. There's a non-video version where they don't have to look at our beautiful faces.
Right. The nice thing about having listener emails is it means there's actually somebody listening. If nobody listened, then what would be the point? First question. This is from John. He asked, are aftermarket grips allowed in IDPA matches?
Yes. Next question.
Yes.
IDP what?
IDPA matches.
That's the one where we wear the fishing vests
Yeah,
and
fishing vests,
we
yeah,
run
okay.
around and hide
Right.
behind things.
Actually, not only is the answer yes, but
yes.
there's a part in the rule book that addresses it, and it is kind of interesting in the context of what is a grip. Because if you think of the conventional removable grip panels like you find on something like a 1911 or a CZ or any of the common kind of older generation handguns, the grip panels are intended to come off. They're easy to replace. There's plenty of aftermarket replacements for them. And since the rule book says grips may be changed to another style or material that is similar to factory configuration, no weighted grips, so you
Right.
couldn't put tungsten grips on your gun.
Like the really gross.
Right. Well,
Actually, aluminum grips are
they lighter?
Yeah. I actually have a pair of the Techwell aluminum grips on the 1911, and they're lighter than the factory Colt wood grips.
Oh, wait a minute. So this thing about stippling and whatnot, or replacement of grips, does that apply to all divisions, or are we talking about one division?
well, the stippling is a separate issue because you're stippling an integral part of the gun frame
Right.
as opposed to replacing a replaceable part of the frame.
Okay.
So-
So this whole entire thing about replacing grips applies. Not
If
just
you
stock
if
grips,
it's a
but
nar-
also CP.
if you narrowly interpret the question as applying to guns like 1911s, the answer is obviously yes.
Yeah.
But then the
Cigs.
question, anything where you take the screw out and the grip panel comes off to be
Right.
interchangeable panels. But now you've got a whole generation of guns where the whatever traction there is molded right into the frame, and you can't mess with that. But apparently, if the frame has a interchangeable backstrap, which is also now on the Gen 4 Glocks, it's on M&Ps, it's on just about everything, you apparently can stipple that.
Yeah.
And so that, I guess the fact that it is replaceable, interchangeable, that distinction is what allows you to alter it or change it from stock.
So, for example, if you have a Glock 34, like the one I had a couple of episodes ago, and you stipple any part of that grip, because it's a Gen 3, that'll automatically make it an ESP gun.
Right.
With enhanced service pistol. Now, you can stay legal in stock service pistol with an M&P. We use that as an example. If you take the removable backstrap off, stipple the crap out of that, put it back on, it's still legal for SSP because it is a removable grip. IDP have used it the same as the grips that come off a 1911 or a SIG or or whatever.
The key being, if it's removable,
Yes.
it can be removed and changed for something else.
Yep.
It's like the IDPA rulebook is heading in the direction of IPSC rules. Sounds like.
Yay!
Well, it would be
I mean,
if they
Well,
said
no, I mean in a negative sense of how obscure. how
if they
obscure
said
rules are.
you could take the grips off your 1911 and change them, but you can't take the backstrap off your MP and change it.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be consistent.
That would, at least this is consistent. Even though you then ask, well, if I can change the backstrap, how come I can't change the front strap? And of course, the difference being is that the part that's integral to the frame can't be altered in stock service pistol.
But it's still illegal to, like a Glock 19 or 17 or 34 or whatever, to stipple the grip at all.
Yes,
IDPA.
exactly.
Well, you can still, it'll change your division.
You can shoot an ESP.
No, I'm sorry, I meant
Yeah.
You can stay in SSP.
Stock service
Yeah.
pistol. Yeah. I mean, the question is fairly broad in IDPA matches, and the answer is yes. But you have to consider that if you're shooting in stock service pistol division, the rules are constrain what you can do in terms of removing and replacing and altering.
Yeah, and staying in the division.
Yeah, and stay within stock service pistol. That's another thing we kind of touched on, I think, in the last episode when we were talking about plastic guns, is why do people insist on staying in stock service pistol? I can't put that on my gun because then I can't shoot in a stock service pistol. Or I can't, yeah, exactly. It's not like you can't play anymore. You just can't play an SSP. Thank you, John.
Good question, John.
Yeah, John,
Little broad.
that was awesome. Next question is from Cotter. Cotter's been hammering us the last week or so. Question about an issue that Steve brought up: the possibility of breaking off the tip of the ejector when inserting a fresh mag.
Oh, yeah.
How is this even possible? Is it a common occurrence or ultra rare? Where does removing the slide stop feature, the slide stop function feature on the gun and on the mag's follower come into all this? I guess that's a bit more than a single question, but I've never heard of this before. Okay, so let's start off with breaking the tip off the ejector when inserting a fresh mag. How is this even possible?
In terms of it being a common problem, the answer is no, because everybody's disabled their slide stop, so it can't happen. If you don't,
Hold it. We're talking about the ejector, though.
Sorry, did I say slide stop? I didn't say slide stop, didn't I?
We're starting with the first question about how to break the ejector.
They're both kind of in the gun there. So.
Okay, so yeah, how come we're not breaking ejectors left and right?
So the problem with a wide body gun is the way that the magazine stops as you insert it into the gun. Let's first look at a 1911 to address this. A 1911 has the tab at the bottom of the magazine, which hits the frame, the bottom of the frame, and it's a positive stop. It can't go any further than that. When you get it,
I'll elaborate on
yeah,
that.
well, if you bust it off, it will. But and if you're using, let's say, a 10-round magazine, in the case of the McCormick's, they kind of put this new funky plastic base pad on the bottom of the magazine, which replicates or duplicates, whatever you want to put it, the stop on the magazine, so again, you can't shove it through the gun.
Right.
The Wilsons, they weld that tab on there, which I think you're going to say breaks off. But
I'll say it if he doesn't.
Yeah.
You can bend the trip ones too if you insert
Okay,
hard
right.
enough.
And the idea there, at least, is that you have, from the dimensions of the grip of the 1911, which is constant, and hopefully the magazine dimensions are constant, assuming that everybody, manufactures everything to those constants, you cannot, unless you really jam the thing hard and attempt to break things, really over-insert the magazine. The problem with the wide-body guns is that the only thing that stops that magazine of going through the gun is the base pad, whichever one you've chosen to go with. And there's Dawson, there's Bevan, there's a pile of different base pads out there. STI makes a handful of different base pads. Hitting the magwell. Well, how many different magwells are there for a 2011? There's STI, there's Dawson, there's, I think,
SNA.
There's so many.
Right.
Yeah.
So the thing is that you have now different combinations of different things all going together, and it's really dependent on where that base pad happens to hit your magwell. And in my particular gun, I went and looked at it, and it stops short of the ejector just by normally inserting it. But if I was to really aggressively insert it into the magwell very hard, I can see where it could possibly go forward and hit that ejector tip. So the reason, or the idea here, is that because of the fact that we're dealing with a lot of unknown quantities, some people run different magazines or different base pads on their magazines in their gun. They may have some Dawsons, they may have some Maradano, they may have some Bevan Grahams, and they may have a plethora of
word for the day
of different magazines that they're using. So the idea is that rather than risking the chance of the top round in the magazine hitting the ejector and busting it off with a slide lock back, we just decided to disable the slide and make sure that we can't over-insert the magazine. There's another reason for doing this, and that is that with the double stack column magazines, where the slide lock ends up making contact with that magazine, it's very possible to trip the slide stop on the next to last round that's in the magazine. So what will happen is the slide will lock back with 2 rounds left in the magazine. You don't want to do that. So it's kind of, there's really 2 reasons for it. One is to prevent over-insertion and breaking the ejector tip. The other one for disabling it is really to prevent premature slide lock.
And the issue with the premature slide lock, if you're talking about USPSA limited or open, where you've got 20 to 30 rounds in the gun, and you've predetermined where your reloads are going to fall, and probably have a round or 2 to spare at the reload point, you're never going to need the slide lock back. And so the actual loss of automatic slide lock function isn't costing you anything if you think that you're getting the benefit of preventing the premature slide lock.
And for the most part, again, even with limited 10 or production or whatever, you're doing the same thing. But if you look at a Corsafire in IPSC or whatever, typically it's you go into a port, you shoot 6 or 8 rounds. And if that port happens to have some steel, it might be more than 6 or 8 rounds. But generally speaking, it's around 6 or 8 rounds. Your magazine's holding, well, in the case of single stack, 8. So you've got almost no room for failure in production. You've got 10. You've got a little wiggle room there. But the chances of you running up against your slide stop are a lot higher in those divisions as you decrease your magazine capacity. And limited, I may fire a couple extra rounds here, and I may, mentally make aware of that I just fired more rounds in this last port, so maybe I'll do a reload somewhere out of sequence that I wasn't planning on doing. But more
Right.
often than not, I'm, with 20 rounds in the gun, I've got effectively three 8-round ports that I can shoot through before I really, actually 2. 24 would be good, or at any rate. A lot of, room there to make mental assessment of what I need to do down the road to, recover from that.
So there you go.
You can also avoid all of this by shooting the Glock, with the caveat that if you have the extended slide stop on your Glock, I would take that off because I actually I disabled the slide stop on the Glock because I was having problems with knocking it to slide lock early from my support hour I never on it.
Too. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I went to the safe area, pulled the slide stop out, and I did run into exactly what you were talking about, where there's a stage with a bunch of steel, and I wasn't tracking my rounds well, and all of a sudden the gun goes click, and I'm like, wait a minute, click, oh, I didn't go to slide lock, I took my slide lock out, I should probably reload now.
Yeah, I've had actually the opposite happen on a Glock where my thumb rests right on the slide
So
lock or
slide
whatever.
lock, go to slide lock.
It didn't go to slide lock. I mean, I went and shot the magazine dry, and it's like, click, huh? And like, there's nothing in here. There's no rounds at all. It didn't lock back. It's because I had my thumb on it. So.
And I'd say the worst case scenario would be if you either didn't know if it was going to lock or not. I mean, that's one of the issues, I think, especially with single stack 1911s, is that depending on the tolerances between the follower, the magwell, and the slide stop, you can have the slide stop slip past the slide stop, the follower slip past the slide stop. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, and I can't imagine anything worse than not knowing when the slide is forward whether it should have locked back or not. So either you disable it or you ensure that it works all the time, so at least you know one way or the other. I've seen lots of guys. Occasionally I see somebody in limited who will do a reload and rack the slide because they don't really know whether it's empty or not. They know they've fired more rounds than they were supposed to, but they don't know, did they fire 6 shots or only 5? So they rack the slide, and sometimes a round pops out, which means they didn't need to do it, but they didn't want to get the gun up on target and into the port, then have it go click. So they rack it. So anyway, there you go.
I think the standard pretty much is if you're shooting single stack or limited 10 with a single stack gun, you're going to have a working slide stop. If you're shooting limited or open, you're going to have disabled your slide stop. Double stack is a real good reason for doing it. Production, single stack, all those, there's a good reason for making sure it works.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, here's a question from the Black Knight. I'm trying to speed up my press outs from the draw without losing the front sight at the end. I'm doing the old metronome trick where with a timer, I'll dry fire at a simulated 7-yard target, get my baseline, do 10 draws, bump it up 0.15 faster part time until I hit the wall, repeat again. Any tips?
Well, now a little bit of background. What he's talking about as a press out trick is some instructors teach when you draw the gun, you don't draw it up to this ready position and then bring it out from here onto the target. You actually draw it into your eye line
And then push
and
forward.
pick up the sights from here and go forward. So if you guys so if people who are watching this don't know what he's talking about, he's talking about acquiring the sights up here and then driving the gun towards the target and firing from there. I actually, and some people I know that know me wouldn't be sad to hear this, I actually was doing that, and I've abandoned it for most shooting because honestly, in IDPA and USPSA, very rarely am I presented with a low probability target that requires me to be on the sights that early to get a fast first shot. You're usually drawing to an open paper or something like that where you can rely on a repeatable index. But that being said, if you're trying to get faster with the press out, ditch the metronome.
Yeah, can you repeat that part that he had there with the metronome, because that just sounds like that is.
He's doing the old metronome trick, so he's got a baseline.
Right. So
Speed.
Like a 1.5 second.
Yeah, and then he does 10 draws, then he knocks the time, his part time down 0.15. Then he does it again, drops it down another 0.15 until he can't do it any faster.
Yeah, my opinion on trying to use a metronome or a timer or whatever to set a base mark or a benchmark on your draw is that mentally you start focusing more on the time rather than on the technique. And what you really want to work on is the technique. The time will take care of itself. Speed will come through improving the technique. But starting out saying, I want to hit this particular time and start working that down means you're focusing on time, not on the technique. I would throw the timer and everything away, relatively speaking, rhetorically speaking, but I would just work on this repetitive draw of coming onto a target and keep working on that. As you start eliminating wasted motion, the time will come down.
I would take a two-pronged approach to that. In dry fire, I don't ever use a timer in dry fire.
Yeah.
When I dry fire, my focus in dry fire is on the motion. I want to, if I'm doing reloads in dry fire, my reload will look like this because I want it to be a perfect motion. If I'm trying to work on speed, say I've got a 1.5 second reload and I want it to be 1.2 is my goal. I will do my perfect reloads in dry fire. When I go to the range, when I'm doing it live and I have a timer, that's when I'll try to execute the motion perfectly as fast as I can. And that's where I'm going to look for my speed. So I don't want to look for speed in dry fire when I should be focusing on economy of motion and technique.
Right.
Speed comes with bullets.
Yeah.
This is from David. David says, after watching your show for a few months, I finally decided to try out some IPSC shooting.
Long-term watcher.
Trouble is, in order to see my front sight clearly, I need to wear my prescription glasses, reading glasses, which means everything else outside a yard distant is a blur. But I can still distinguish what is what, even out to 50 yards, since that's how I shoot bullseye. If I just wear normal shooting glasses, everything is clear and sharp, except the pistol sights, which are a blur. So, should I shoot with or without my prescription glasses?
I'll let you guys take this one. I have 2010 vision.
I do too. So
Rick, how are your eyes?
my vision close in is actually beginning to go away. So
Yeah, we addressed this in an earlier episode, I think when we were talking about equipment, and I think you really have to have sharp focus on the front sight. I mean, we discuss alternate.
well, I guess we differ on that one.
Yeah, I mean, if I were addressing this to Rob Latham or somebody, I might have a different opinion. But if you can't see the sights, you're generally not going to hit anything. I would recommend, if you have to wear prescription lenses in order to see the sights in focus, that probably the best suggestion would be the shooter's style bifocal that has the reading glass part at the top of the lens rather than at the bottom. And that allows you to kind of take advantage. Most people, when they bring the gun up, they bring the head down a little bit to the sights, and the act of that kind of natural motion of lowering your head to the sights brings the reading part of the lens in line with your eye. And then to tip your head back up, which again is natural to kind of survey things, look for the next target, that brings your distant focus in the lower part of the lens. And you can get regular prescription lenses and fit them to a set of impact lenses that have a little fixture inside to attach a corrective lens. Or you can get impact-resistant corrective lenses that have the impact resistance and the correction built right in. And I don't think either one is going to be especially cheap if you've got to get a special shooting lens. I had intended, as I mentioned in the other episode, to have special contact lenses for shooting that sort of have the same effect, in that my strong eye lens is corrected for front sight distance and my weak eye lens is corrected to infinity. So when I'm shooting, my strong eye has a nice sharp focus on the front sight, but then when I'm looking for the next target or looking at any other thing on the range, I've still got good focus. And your brain actually, initially it's kind of weird to have different focus distances in your two eyes, but your brain tends to kind of pick and choose what it wants to see. And so I find I can read, I can see things at distance, and your brain will just kind of automatically pick the better view, But yeah, I would suggest, if you have to wear corrective lenses, I think the bifocals with the near sight, the correction for near sight at the top probably makes the best sense.
Wear your regular glasses and shoot open.
Yeah. Well, one of the problems that I have is because this eye is corrected for like 3 foot distance.
Right.
Optics don't work for me because everything's blurry out at anything I look at with my strong eye is blurry out at. If I'm focusing on the target, I can't see much of anything with my strong eye. So if I were going to shoot optics, I'd probably wear my glasses, which have are corrected more or less at all distances, but I get the sharper focus at distance with my left eye.
So
with
one
my glasses.
alternative I would mention, which I talked about before, is I developed kind of a look through the sights and look at the target method for shooting. So if you can actually see things at distance fairly well, you may kind of start playing around with that rather than trying to maintain a hard focus in the front sight, looking through the sights at the target. And what happens there is actually the target is not perfectly in focus. The front sights are also not perfectly in focus, but they're both in focus enough that you can actually very accurately place rounds on target. This really depends on, or is necessary to you to be a fairly dominant eye shooter. In other words, if you're a right-handed, right-eye dominant, I shoot with both eyes open so I can see the whole entire picture, and I'm looking at the target with both eyes open, but I don't have any trouble trying to pick out what is the correct front sight image when I'm doing that, so it's another option.
I actually been messing around with that at short range and trying to push it back, and it produces really fast results on target.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've gotten it back to the point now where I can reliably get it out about 10-15 yards. So I agree with Steve. It's actually something worth trying, especially in the. It's not the best for like low percentage shots. So if I'm shooting at an 8-inch plate at 25 yards, I'm probably going to try to hard focus on the front sight. But again, most of USPSA shooting isn't 8-inch plates at 25 yards.
No, but I mean, if you keep working with it, because what you're going to find out is that you're probably going to switch to that type of focus for nearly everything. I mean, I used that same focus for 8-inch plates at 25 yards. I've used it for full lipstick targets at 50 yards, and just literally looking through the sights, and I'm looking at the target, and I can see the top sight in my vision on the target. I know where it's at. I know where it's shot.
I'm going to have to keep pushing that back, but
Yeah.
I think it's worth a shot.
Oh,
shot!
right, yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, we're all leaving.
Thanks, yeah.
Take a waitress.
All right. Yeah. So now that Wisconsin has concealed carry, this is from Steve.
Oh, yeah.
Now there's just, I think, one state left. Is it Illinois?
Yes.
It has no concealed carry of any kind.
Good luck.
Yeah. Now that Wisconsin has concealed carry, our club is looking to update our guidelines to make sure that we have a procedure in place where people can start to arrive at the match with a concealed weapon. How do you handle concealed weapons? Do you make them unload in their car before they check in? Do you have an SO take them to the range and have them unload? And the answer is yes, yes,
And yes.
and yes. Since we've had concealed carry, legal, licensed concealed carry in Washington for about 50 years, it's been an issue at all of the ranges, pretty much at which I shoot. And I have found that most ranges, I don't think they handle it very well. They have sort of like a don't ask, don't tell. Yeah, it's like your gun is expected to be unloaded, but they don't provide guidelines. They don't provide a place specifically for unloading. And I've even been places where they say, like, don't touch your gun at your car. But then if you arrive at the range, don't bring a loaded gun. So if I have a loaded gun and I'm in my car, then how am I supposed to unload it? And one of the ranges where I used to shoot, they actually built what looks sort of like an armored phone booth just inside the gate. It's walls that are lined with I think they just put rocks in it, large, like river rocks in it. But it's like,
That seems kind of scary.
yeah, well,
Right.
anyway, yeah, you maybe you'll only hurt yourself if it goes off. But the idea being that if you're in there and you have an AD, the bullet's not going to get out after bouncing around a little
Yeah,
bit.
after it kills you.
Yeah. But anyway, I mean, I think that the 55-gallon drum that's half full of sand at an angle out near the gate is probably a good
That's
idea.
actually at Marysville, which we shot at, has a blast barrel, like you're saying, literally just inside the gate, and then you got to drive up a road and get up to the IPSC base up there and stuff like that. So it's kind of the expectation is that if you're carrying or whatever, you stop off with the blast barrel, which like you're saying, it's a 55-gallon drum, and go to the ground with sand in there or whatever, and you take care of it there. But assuming somebody misses that and they show up up there,
Yeah.
what's the next step?
Yeah, I mean, our IDPA match is part of the walkthrough prior to the match is an announcement that includes things like, this is a cold range, no loaded weapons on the range except under the direction and supervision of a safety officer. Does anybody have a loaded gun? And usually 2 or 3 times a year, it's generally somebody who's just forgotten that they've got their carry gun. And so they'll just be like, oh, you see them kind of go, oh. And they realize they've got the gun, and they raise their hand, and so we've got a kind of a little amnesty period for anybody who's actually managed to get into the shooting bay area with a loaded gun. Hey, grab a safety officer, take them over to an empty bay, and get them unloaded. But we shot a match. It was within the last 6 months where a guy was having a lot of trouble with his gun, his match gun. And at one point, he puts it in his pocket and then like draws a second gun
Oh my God.
out of the small of the back or an ankle holster or something like a 32 and tries to finish the stage. And I think the safety officer was so flabbergasted that he just
didn't
kind
know
of,
to kill
he
him.
just watched. He didn't really know what to do, you know.
With his mouth wide open.
Yeah, exactly.
Did that just
Exactly.
happen?
Yeah, and so the guy, you know, he's got a loaded gun on the range when he's not supposed to. He's carrying a
gosh.
second gun, which according to IDPA rules, he's not supposed to. It's you
It's
know,
a bug gun.
it was bug legal, but it wasn't a bug match. So I mean, the guy was in trouble in a number of respects. But other than that one weird situation, it's always been taken care of through, you know, just kind of reminding people, like if your club has a website. Where you do match announcements and stuff, maybe put a reminder on there that there's a cold range and don't bring any loaded guns on. And again, probably provide some place, you know, that it's
Yeah.
where they can direct the muzzle, and so that if they do have an issue, the round doesn't end up in
That's
the
the
neighbor's backyard.
problem is that, you know, a lot of people try to do this, like you were saying, in their car because they don't want to, either they don't want to get out and do it in the blast barrel, or
They don't want somebody
a
to
blast
see 'em,
barrel,
yeah,
or they
yeah.
don't want somebody to see 'em, yeah, right. So they try to do this inside their car, where it's cramped, where things can get jammed in the places they're not supposed to. And when I
Right,
took
so
a
it's floorboards.
Yeah, when I took a class at Firearms Academy of Seattle, Marty specifically pointed out, he said you'd be surprised the number of times where people, you know, at the end of the match, at the end of the training, people are allowed to gun up and go home or do whatever they want to do, and they much prefer they do the gun up process or whatever out there in the bay, rather than go back to your
absolutely.
car and do blam, you know.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
It's not a good place to do
I
that.
think the most important thing is to have a consistent procedure that you use from match to match. You know, if you're running matches in Wisconsin and, you know, one club, and if at all possible, when I shot in Indiana, all the clubs had a consistent procedure for it. You know, they would all say in the safety briefing, this is a cold range, if you have a loaded weapon on you at this time, these are the safety officers, one of them will take you down and will unload you. And they had safe areas. And
Take you down. That's the
Yeah,
part.
Take
Yeah.
you down. And then I shoot a beginners friendly match at West Coast Armory in Bellevue, and they have the same thing where if someone shows up with a loaded gun, because it's an indoor range as well, and you'll have people come over from the other bays to shoot. If they show up with a loaded gun, they send them next door to one of the pistol bays and have them unload over there before they come back. So have a consistent procedure. Don't just kind of half-ass it one day and think that's good enough, because that is how people get shot.
So here's a question for you. What if there are no open bays at that time? Then what do you do?
I would have a safety officer take them over to the safe area.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing, is that it has to be a safety officer or match official or whatever
Yeah.
they're going to, because it's the whole entire, you know, no loaded guns in
Right.
the safety area, but then all of a sudden you've got
And then you go to the
a
cemetery with a
catch-22.
loaded gun.
Yeah.
You got a loaded gun, you can't go to the safety area, you can't go anywhere else, and they
Right.
get credit, so what do you do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So make sure you and get them unloaded. Okay. Here's another question. If you're doing a slide lock reload, after loading the mag into the gun, to release the slide, do you use the slide release lever or do you slingshot the slide?
Well, you don't do slide lock reloads.
Yeah.
Slide lock? What's that?
Yeah, my gun won't go slide lock, so
I prefer to use the slide release, the button lever located on the side of my gun. But I'm right-handed, and I actually have fairly large hands, especially for someone my size. So even on a Glock 21 in 45 ACP, I can reach the slide lock lever with my strong hand thumb without having to, crank the gun around at an odd angle. It's faster for me. It's consistent from gun to gun. So that's my preferred technique, and especially in the context of IDPA shooting, that's definitely the way I'm going to do it. Now, I'm also not left-handed, though.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and the thing about operating the slide stop, I think that I've seen the slide stop when it's going in one direction, the slide release when it's going in the other direction, is that if you're right-handed, if you can't reach it with your strong thumb, when you bring your weak hand up into the support position, your weak hand thumb's probably going to be right on it anyway.
Yeah.
And so as you assume your grip, it's natural to just flip it off.
actually, that is what I do on a 1911. Is I'll hit it with my left thumb
Right.
on a 1911.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, being a lefty with my thumbs both on the other side of the gun, my options are, I've tried different options. I've tried to reach up with my trigger finger to hit the slide stop, and I can usually reach it, but different guns have different amounts of pressure holding the slide open, how much pressure and friction you have to overcome. Plus, it delays getting your grip back on the gun because you have to break your grip a little bit to get it up onto the slide stop. So you get the mag in there, and then you have to sort of wait for the finger to get up there, drop the slide, and get back down before you can get your weak hand on the gun anyway. So I don't find that to work out too well. I've also tried to bring these fingers up and trip it, but consistently locating the slide stop with the same finger all the time. The slide stop isn't always in the same place. I shoot mostly 1911s, and even so, I had a hard time consistently locating that slide stop with my fingers. There's no kind of reference point the way there is when you're grabbing it like this and your thumb's right on top of it. I jam the mag in like that, and I'm still kind of feeling around for it. And so I've just gone to the overhand like this. It's universal. That's one of the other things, is that any auto pistol you shoot, you rack it like this. Don't do one of these deals.
You don't ride it forward.
Don't ride it forward. That's going to, if it doesn't cause a malfunction, it will certainly help to cause one. You should actually, the motion of your arm should be more like this than like this. You want to get it all the way back and let it fly. And that slows down getting your hand back on the gun, but it's already a slower technique. I'm not doing it because it's fast. I'm doing it because it's more certain, and it's consistent, and it works every time.
If you are going to use that technique, I would strongly recommend you get like a Novak or a Heine or some kind of low-profile rear sight. I have scars on my left hand from going over the top on guns with Bowmark style sights, which is just like, it's like getting a handful of razor blades if you slip. So.
Yeah, and you can melt all the edges on them. But one of the other techniques that I've fooled around with a little bit is I hate forward cocking serrations. We could probably do a show about that.
That's a good one.
But one of the only usefulness I've seen for them is as you do the reload, my finger and my thumb are now essentially in line with where the forward cocking serrations are on a gun with the slide lock back. And you can actually release the slide just like that.
That's pretty ninja.
And
I think that would look just cool.
And so you're getting your it's essentially the same physical act as the slingshot, because you're pushing the slide all the way to the rear and then letting it go rather than tripping the slide stop. And some high-speed, low-drag people say they prefer the overhand slingshot because you're getting that extra 1/8 of an inch of slide travel, which makes the feeding more certain. And I don't know if that's true or not, but if you like that theory, if you believe that the gun feeds more reliably when the slide comes all the way to the back and it goes forward like it does when it's cycling and firing, rather than losing that little bit of travel with the slide stop, this underhand thing is kind of nice. The reason I really hate the front cocking serrations is because I see people kind of reach for them like this. They know that they're going to come back with their hand, and they go out in front of the muzzle and then come back. And the people who are doing it,
or the ones who, like you're saying, come up from underneath, is they'll come up under the.
Oh yeah, this is even worse.
Yeah,
but the thing about coming up like this is that your hand you never even intend to extend it out in front of the muzzle. I mean, there's no reason. You've already got intent. Yeah, we always get in trouble when we talk about intent. But if you're inserting the mag like this and your hand to go straight up to the slide like that, it's definitely less dangerous. I mean, I see guys, it's like the front cocking serrations. If they could brush their teeth with the front cocking serrations, they'd use them for that. I mean, they use it to load, they use it to unload, they use it to press check.
Okay,
and I just,
all right.
Get them off there. Don't use them. I hate them. Okay.
All right, you got one more question.
Well, I got one thing to say about
Okay, one thing to say. What's the one thing to say that's about that?
Okay, so my view on this is that with the STI, the slide never locks back.
Right.
If I do happen to mismanage my ammo and run the thing dry, insert the magazine, and my next move obviously is rack it. So my motion there is coming over the top and racking it. With the Glock 19, I have never found the slide lock to work very well as a slide release. I mean, you're simply going, okay, it went. So again,
Well, most Glocks, when you slam the mag in, the slide goes forward
do that
anyway.
Too, sometimes, yeah.
Surprise!
Yeah, the automatic loading feature, but it ain't right.
Gaston's best idea.
So again, with the 19, rather than trying to mess with something that may or may not work, again, I'm over the top and doing that. With 1911s, it's kind of like, might do one or the other. A lot of times, just depending on what's happening, and usually I don't force it to be one way or the other. Just kind of let my brain decide what it wants to do. So sometimes it'll beat that, and other times, depending on the situation, it might beat this. So.
So I recommend figure out one that works and practice it.
Yeah, it's best to use one and apply it everywhere.
Yeah, don't try to go back and forth. Because
Yeah.
then you'll end up trying to reload from slide lock and just, not knowing what to do.
Yeah, confusion reigns.
It
So,
does.
so the last question said, I noticed that Rick was wearing a shoulder holster on the last episode. And if you also notice, there's a little bit of kind of a Miami Vice thing going with
Just a bit.
a little bit. But anyway, so we've got kind of the shoulder holster theme again this week.
Holster.
Holster, yes. Holster, yeah.
Emphasis
Shoulder
on
carry. We'll call it shoulder carry.
Carry,
Yeah, and so there's nothing. I'd say this week's episode, the theme is kind of one-upmanship.
Clearly, one of us is one up the other.
Yeah, I had on my 38
So,
Super.
so Rick, what do you?
Well, yeah, what's in your
Okay,
shoulder?
I've got my Elliot Ness style shoulder holster with my Colt 380.
Yeah, so that people can actually see.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that. Now, does that break like straight out?
Oh, it's got the nice spring clip on it
Oh,
here,
nice.
1930 style.
classy.
And yeah, I just it's the right environment. If it was a little more formal, I might have worn something in black like Steve's, but
Your PBK,
yeah,
Mr.
exactly,
Bond.
yeah, exactly. But for this, I think it's adequate.
Steve, what do you have?
So I'm using my favorite Glock 19. I have a Black Hills leather. They custom built it, so you place your order and wait 3 months. And then an offside here carrying 2 magazines. So I'm fully loaded with 45 rounds.
And I like it because it's pretty much all metal and all leather.
Yeah.
A lot of
It
shoulder
is
holsters
work,
have
yeah.
a lot of plastic on them, and if you're going to carry a plastic gun, I guess it doesn't really matter. But if you've got a real metal gun, you should put it in a real holster that doesn't have any plastic parts on it. So that's nice.
Now, I don't actually have a shoulder holster because I was born in the 80s. So, however, I decided to go with the next best thing that I have. And I have a Vickers Tactical Sling rigged up as an SAS-style single point. And on the end of it, I have a Chris SDP, which apparently, and I got this direct from Chris, SDP stands for Security Detail Pistol. So, yeah, that's pretty slick. It
So
is-
who would use a gun like that?
people that normally wear jackets that tie up in the rear and then the windows.
Well, there you go. There you go. So there you go. That's the shoulder holster
No, it's
strap.
a 45 ACP, of
Yeah,
course, because
so
that makes
I'm-
perfect sense.
So 45, 9, and 380, right?
Yep.
Yep, there we go.
Got them all covered.
And the weirdest possible guns. That's what's up.
Somebody has little man syndrome.
It only weighs 3.5 pounds. It's not that heavy. Come on.
Okay.
All right, then.
This next episode is the Chris SSP legal? So until then, I'm Rick.
I'm Caleb.
I'm Steve.
Bye.